You are listening to Investing Matters, brought to you in association with London South East. This is the show that provides informative, educational, and entertaining content from the world of investing. We do not give advice, so please do your own research.
Hello and welcome to the London South East Investing Matters podcast. My name is Peter Higgins, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with John Hughman, the former editor of the Investors Chronicle magazine, and now the co-founder of the InvestAbility educational investing website. Hello, John. How are you?
Hi, Peter. How are you doing? I'm good, thank you.
Good. Now, today, John, I'd like to start our interview with you by thinking a bit about your early career and what led to where you are now. You know, going all the way back to you as a graduate almost. Where do you want to start, mate?
Oh, yeah, it's a very long story, so hopefully we've got time. I actually studied history at university, and I've actually been back to university since then, so I'm a historian by background. But when I left, I strangely went into advertising with a sort of detour via a sort of very cutting-edge culture magazine called Sleaze Nation, which some people may have heard of. In fact, it's very, very topical now, given what's going on in Parliament. It was inspired. Its name was inspired by.
Well, we're not going to go into that.
No. But yes, it's sort of the echoes are there today. So it's sort of a very strange beginning. Having sort of left university, I ended up with a client who worked in financial services, and I ended up going to work for them. And it turned out to be venture capital, looking at sort of technology investments. It was a company called Evolution Capital. And sort of over the years, that company evolved into what became Evolution Securities and more of a sort of general stockbroker. But I spent the beginning of my career sort of traipsing around the country, looking at little tech companies and seeing if they were sort of ripe for investment. And yeah, that's really where I began to learn my trade as an analyst. And as I said, that business then evolved into something that looks more like a sort of stockbroker as we know it, where I covered as an analyst software and computer services. And I picked a wonderful time to do it because I think I started just before the turn of the millennium and left 3 years later. And that whole time was essentially the deflating of the dot-com bubble. So it was a funny old time.
Yeah, the great financial crisis, as we call it.
Well, no. It was the one before. It was the one before that. It was the dot-com collapse.
Okay, I want to go back just a little bit because you mentioned the Sleaze Nation bit, and then the bit at Publicis where you're a media company. But I wanted to get back to the nuance of already you're at the stage here, John, where you were headhunted for this investment boutique startup called then Evolution Capital and later Evolution Securities, if I remember rightly.
That's correct.
Firstly, what were you doing at the media behemoth Publicis to garner that sort of attention where Evolution goes, we've got to have that little wide boy there called John Hughman working for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it was sort of all, everything's been very serendipitous. So that agency that I worked for was a division of the bigger Publicis group, and we specialised in the technology industry. So we had clients like Hewlett Packard, Oracle, Adobe, companies like that. So I spent a lot of time just reading and putting research packs together for the account teams, looking at the tech industry, in what really was the very early days of it. So I started to build this knowledge, which I then sort of started to, just chatting with the clients about who worked for one of the big asset management firms in London before he then left to go and set up Evolution. So yeah, it was just I think they'd sort of seen my research background, knew that I had knowledge of the technology industry. Knew that I sort of had processes behind that. One of the things I did at Publicis Tech, as it was called, was kind of help build their web team. Then again, very, very early days of web shops. It was a bit Wild West. And I do remember during that time, the other thing that was absolutely fascinating was how many people were trying to start their own dot-com businesses.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all it seemed anyone ever wanted to do. I'm not sure how we actually ever got any work done because people were either trading the market or trying to set up a .com. But either way, I kind of went into as I say, the sort of it was an easy decision to make. Going into sort of cutting edge tech, which I'd been looking at for a while, was really exciting. And as I say, I'd built up this knowledge and knowledge of the bigger industry, which was attractive to the guys I went to work for at Evolution.
Brilliant. So you would say you're attracted to, you're already in the .com sort of era and the nuance of it, the start of it. What was your greatest learning whilst at Evolution then? Because all the tech stuff just bubbling off.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I've really learned, and I think it's stuck with me to this day, possibly to my detriment, is that I am a cautious investor now. I look at markets with a cautious eye, and I think when we Phil and I, when we set up InvestAbility, that was something we took through to that as well. Don't lose money. So when you've seen a whole industry unravel, particularly in the UK, as we did, covering software and services, there aren't many companies that were on my patch that exist today. We saw lots of fraud. We saw lots of accounting issues. We even saw some chief executives in court, or one of them ended up in prison. So I took the view away that just because there is this fantastic industry, it doesn't mean that every company within it is good. And so you really have to do your homework. It's also it's a really cautionary tale in that actually companies can disappear. Companies can go to the wall. Companies can get things very, very wrong. And we saw a great deal of that, in those very, very difficult years.
As we're seeing now, it's almost like, as an historian, you see history repeating itself. I've got a question for you later on about that. Now, what I'm intrigued by now, John, is that you and I have worked together and we've spoken together and we've seen each other about for many, many years now. And now I've always assessed you as being quite a tough, pretty self-assured individual, right? Therefore, I'm also a father to a teenager, and you took a career break, and you helped your partner throughout that time with your twin daughters. And although you carried on working as a freelancer, I wanted to ask you this very, very important questions. Do your twins have you wrapped around their fingers, your daughters?
Yeah, I guess
certainly does.
I guess they have done over the years. I suspect they think I'm a soft touch. So yeah, of course, they're my daughters. Of course, they have me wrapped around their little fingers.
Yeah, I mean, what I liked about that particular time of you taking a break, though, is that even now that's quite progressive. That as a dad, although it shouldn't be, progressive, is that you took the important step of taking time out to work freelance, moving away from your proper job to do freelance stuff, to look after your daughters with your partner at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it was a different time. Things like paternity leave they didn't exist back then, and that we obviously had a challenge ahead of us. And sometimes you've got to make a tough decision, which is what I did. And one thing I've got to mention is actually while I was taking that career break, I was still doing work in and around the market. Yeah, so I actually worked with a former colleague who then set up an independent research company, which was sold to another broker, Espirito Santo. I don't know if you remember them, but yeah.
I've got that here with that was with Clear Capital, was it?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So tell us a bit more about that. Tell us a bit more about that project.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I mean, I wasn't involved in it for a long time because the family commitments really took priority. But it was interesting. We've worked in the sales side. And one of the things that I took from being a house broker was really how limited you are sometimes in what you can say. There are relationships that exist within broking firms that really do influence the independence of the analysts and the research that you can actually do. And actually, we felt that my former colleagues at Clear and we felt that actually there was a place in the market for genuinely independent views of equities. And I think that's still the case today. We saw a number of these firms emerge at that point. But the model for actually making a living, making money out of being an independent research analyst was very difficult because of the way that research is paid for at that point, via trading commissions. Not many people were paying for research in and of itself. So it was tough. But I guess the point is, the reason we did it was because we felt there was something that was lacking in the sort of investment research from the sell side. And actually, I think that probably is still the case today.
Agreed, very, very much so. Independence of research, objectivity, which is what you and I and Phil used to talk about quite a lot. Now, after your time at freelancing and Clear and the results that you guys had there at the time, you took then your first spell at the Financial Times, Investors Chronicle, before taking up the huge role of Senior Technology Analyst at Ernst Young. I mean, you're at the top of the tree there, mate.
Wow, yeah, unfortunately not, because it's a partnership. So unless you're a partner, you are very much not at the top of the tree in a professional services firm. But that was a fantastic time. It was again, it was sort of building on this work I'd done, throughout the early stage of my career, looking at sort of big US tech firms, and that's largely what who we were working with at EY, or Ernst Young as it was then. We'd produce big thought leadership pieces looking at the US tech industry, telcos. This was when bundling, so the idea that a telco was more than just a telco. This was when it was first emerging. So we're working with a lot of big telcos on sort of helping them through their strategic shift into content and triple play, quad play, offering multiple services, which was felt to be the way that telcos were going to keep their customers, as markets liberated. So yeah, it was absolutely fascinating. Got to work with lots of people over in the US. Got to spend a lot of time, talking to companies in Europe, particularly in the telecoms equipment space. I think at the time, 3G was being built at that point. We're now on to 5. So that was absolutely fascinating. Video over mobile was not a thing at that point. So, lots of discussion around, the evolution of the mobile device. So, yeah, I mean, it was just part of this sort of patchwork of learning about how the tech and telco industry has developed over the years, which I think really helps you understand where it might go. But yeah, it was an interesting job. It was an interesting job, lots of travel, which was very nice.
Very nice. Okie dokie. So you're also doing all the work with the telcos and the tech companies during what was the other crash. You know what I mean? 2007, 8.
Yeah, just before.
Yeah?
Just
before. Yeah.
Yeah.
So during that financial crash, it was estimated. I'm not sure whether they've ever worked out the proper figures now, John. But it's like $1 trillion of toxic assets, of bad loans were dealt with. During that particular time. Have you ever looked at banks in the same light ever since that time?
I struggle to invest in a bank. I find them quite challenging. I think they're very cumbersome, and they're all slightly different as well. Barclays and Lloyds are not the same beast. So actually, I rejoined the IC. It must have been as the sort of GFC was brewing, and I got married in I think September of that year, and then I delayed my honeymoon because I had the opportunity to edit the news section of the IC for the first time.
How dare you?
I'm not going to let that one up, and the missus was understanding. So yeah, I rocked into the office on Monday morning and to find that Lehman had collapsed. And, it was a baptism of fire, to say the least. But I mean, the interesting thing about that, from my sort of personal perspective, is that my pretty much my entire family had spent their careers working for banks in London. So I had another perspective of it, which was an internal perspective, and I heard lots of war stories about quite how the banking industry came to be what it was, and what it was by that point was very, very badly governed. Very sort of single-minded in the pursuit of profit, and I think the tales I heard were that lending standards had really slipped moving into the GFC. I remember having been asked lots of questions by friends about ISAs. And at the time, a lot of people were asking me, there's this Icelandic ISA and it's offering this much, these interest rates. And, the answer that I often gave them was, well, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. And it was. But again, speaking to people within the industry about the Icelandic banking crisis, which was one of the major triggers, there were lots of questions being asked as to where the source of Iceland's newfound wealth was. It was I'd say having come out the dot-com boom and being cautious, I then went into that and kind of became even more cautious because there are things that happen behind the scenes, and I realized this at the time, which you probably wouldn't expect.
Yeah, I mean, it was a difficult time, really, John. I think a lot of people were getting into investing because it was all about tech, and technology was enabling people to get into the markets a little bit quicker and all the rest of it. But as you say, you had the local authorities were doing it. They were putting their money with banks in Iceland, and you're going, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It's going to end up really, really badly, and it did. And it was only recently I was seeing some articles still talking about some of the local authorities, which are still struggling because of the money they lost back then. 10 years, 12 years on.
Yeah, I mean, it was huge. It was huge.
It was massive. Yeah.
And a lot of people, were able to call on the government and the Financial Services Compensation Scheme to actually get lots of their money back. But lots of people had exceeded what they were covered for. So there was a big it was a big fight. But some people did lose out, and I think it affected confidence in the system quite badly. You could see that. You could feel it. It was again, the second very difficult time, very difficult market conditions that I'd experienced. And but actually the strange thing was by this point you kind of think, well, it's what happens, and actually going back to what I learned from the sort of dot-com boom and bust was that, which is what I think people should perhaps think about now, is that when a sell-off happens, it doesn't happen overnight. When I worked in the broker, it took 3 years pretty much from peak to trough for the FTSE to essentially halve. A bit quicker during the GFC because it was much more of a sort of big bang event, but it still took a long time for the market to hit its nadir. So I do look across the markets at the moment, and you see a little, shares sell off a little bit, and people, this is the big one. It's a correction. We're all buying the dip, and it's like, well, these things, in my experience, don't work that way in the short term.
Indeed. I mean, the beauty of what you've been doing, John, is that I just sense the fact that you've always had a passion for educating others, the investors that were buying the Investors Chronicle, for instance, and you set up all kinds of different sort of blogs. You launched the Investors Chronicle blog, the Chronic Investor, and you got an award for the best online financial journalism. What was it called?
Oh, a Wincott
Prize.
Wincott Award. That was a shock and a surprise at the time. But yeah, I mean, it was just, again, that was during the sort of recovery from that massive crisis. So there was lots to write about. It was great fun, and it was nice to win something as prestigious as that. But and actually, Wincott, I mean, it's worth looking back at Wincott. He was a former editor of the Investors Chronicle, many years ago, post-war. You can still read his writings, and again, a cautious guy, with a kind of very sort of measured way of observing the markets and economics, and I mean, I would encourage people to go and dig out his works. You can do it through the Wincott Foundation website. They're all there. But it's very much inspired me as to sort of how I look at markets and how I further develop as a journalist and columnist, which is what I largely did for my decade running the IC.
Yeah, I mean, this is the stuff about history again, isn't it? It's all about looking back and learning from our past mistakes and things that happened tend to happen again. With regards to all of that, John, what have you learned about your time now from what you going back to 2008 to now, what do you wish you knew then that you know now?
Yeah, I mean, I wish that I'd been less cautious from time to time. When a market rips, it rips for a while. When it hits that bottom and goes, it goes. So I think just because markets don't behave the way you want them to all the time, I don't think that means you should stay away from them. So actually, look for the opportunities and don't always be so worried about things necessarily going wrong, because they do happen periodically. Markets do bounce back, and the thing I've learned definitely over the years is that markets climb those walls of worry, not necessarily with ease, but they do climb them. And there's always plenty to worry about. So worry less, absolutely. I guess, is the big answer.
Absolutely. No, but the beauty of what you did was, it actually, all your hard work paid off. You did so much during those first few years at Investors Chronicle. And if I get this date wrong, please, don't nail me to the mast. But September-ish 2012, you became the editor of Investors Chronicle.
I think that's bang on. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, tell us about that, mate, because obviously that's a massive task now. You're not only doing the other stuff you've done before, you're managing a whole team. And we've often spoke about psychology, but psychology of managing teams is an absolute, task and a half. Yeah. And journalists as well, of all people.
Yeah, indeed. Well, herding cats, I think, would be the expression you would use. But no, I mean, the Investors Chronicle has always had some really fantastic people. And still does. There are writers there who are at the absolute top of their game. And I could point to people like, Behaviour, whose name I shan't mention, even though I know who it is. There's, Chris Thillo, the IC's economist, is,
of course,
an absolutely tremendous writer. And over the years, we've had people like Algie, who's now left there, and Algie Hall, that is the stock screening guru, Phil Oakley, who I set up InvestAbility with, Simon Thompson. There's and lots and lots of other fantastic journalists. Moira O'Neill's a fantastic personal finance journalist who went on to do, or is doing great things at the Interactive, the broker. So yeah, it was easy when you've got such great people writing, with such deep knowledge, writing about the markets. And I heard I think it was the guy that set up Private Eye. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he said when he took over many, many years ago, he walked into the Private Eye office, saw these incredibly talented and knowledgeable journalists around, and said, well, what the hell am I here for as editor? And then so I think he said he concluded that his job would be to kind of just sort of jolly everyone along, make sure they had a good time, and give them the opportunity to do their best work. So in that sense, it doesn't take a lot of organisation. Hands off. Funny enough, it's a bit like perhaps the best way to invest sometimes. But yeah, as I say, it was easy because there were so many great people there. And obviously Rosie Carr is now in charge again. Fantastic deputy over the years. So yeah, I was very lucky.
Oh, that's brilliant. Now, one of the things that you did whilst you were there, though, you developed the online and the digital footprint for Investors Chronicle. Tell me about that, because it almost goes back to your Sleaze Nation and Publicis days, building new sort of income streams.
Yeah, I think in the first instance, it wasn't so much building new income streams. It was really sort of bringing the whole thing, up to the digital age. Yes. So when we launched, we'd barely been online. Or barely been on, we had a mobile app that offered some sort of share price information, which I'd built with a couple of colleagues, but that was it. We didn't have a tablet edition. So first things first. Let's get this stuff firing, because people like to consume media in different ways. So we did that. Over the years, the podcast was something that I spent, that I introduced and sort of built up from a standing start. I
brilliantly may have had.
Thank you. But no, I look back, I think we must have launched to about 5 listeners on a podcast platform. I can't even remember what it was now. But yeah, that was great as well. Giving private investors a different way of consuming, the same sort of content as you and Wheelie do. You know, it's just another great channel, and it's really taken off recently. We sort of expanded that in the end. You know, Phil and I would chat, and we did more sort of show-based things. They're doing some fantastic stuff with sort of interviewing, you know, people across city fund managers in particular. So yeah, that was a big thing, big push for us. Yeah, generally sort of just tweaking things as we went along. The big problem that I always had, that we as a team always had, was the tips section, and it was something we battled with for years and years and years. Because I think when I started, I think we were doing 4 tips a week, 4 large company tips a week, 6 small company tips a week. And, you know, I think that, you know, you look at the numbers, when you produce that many buy or sell recommendations, your performance is always going to just revert to mean. You know, you're going to basically be a closet tracker when you're doing that. And, you know, we always wanted to focus it much more on a few sort of conviction ideas. And you know, that took a lot of doing. You know, we also felt that, you know, when you say buy, you know, that is a sort of, you might think that, and then you know, the numbers on paper or the numbers on a spreadsheet might suggest that, but it doesn't take into account who's buying, you know, the circumstances of the individual. You know, are they risk averse? Are they you know into sort of highly speculative growth companies? Just didn't take that into account. So you know, we sort of tried to introduce things that would allow us to make those distinctions, but it was very hard. It's very hard, you know, and of course, when you're tipping something, if someone buys it and it goes up, they had a great idea. If you tip something, it goes down, it was our terrible idea.
As is always the case. John.
Indeed.
Oh, that is so true.
But yeah, it was, you know, it was, again, as I say, it was a lot of incremental improvements over the years before big redesign at the end of last year, which is fun. I
mean, you say there was bits and incremental and all the rest of it, but you know, you've got the stats in front of me here, and the paid print digital circulation increased by 16%. Your registered audience is doubling. You know, the team, you know, you including others, John, Phil, Algie, and others were winning awards left, right, and centre. So that was all under your tenure.
Yeah, I guess the whole thing was, again, it was just trying to refocus everything on, you know, making sure that we were producing the content that we felt was most valuable to the readership, to private investors, and you know, really sort of some of the, I mean, Phil, Algie, I think we won it about 3 times, the CFA Institute Awards. Algie and Phil, I know, both won Journalist of the Year. And we'd kind of thought, well, let's really dig into, you know, and let's do analysis. Let's do it properly. Like we felt that the sell side sometimes misses. If even you as a private investor can get your hands on it, let's do that. Let's focus on analysis. Let's be more educational. Let's you know, give people the tools to fish rather than, you know, feeding them the odd fishy tip here.
Absolutely. I mean, I love the fact you've got a passion for history, and you've always, you've already experienced .com and the bust and the great financial crash. I'm going to just ask you a question here now. As Seth Klarman says, and sees investing as an intersection of economics and psychology. If so, how do you see that, John? Do you agree, disagree?
I think that's a really good way of looking at it. I mean, you and I have spoken about this before, but I think this, you know, it's taken a long time to realize it. But psychology is probably the most important thing in investing. Certainly, that's what I believe. That, you know, markets don't move because a number changes. They move because people's reaction to something changes, because a mood changes, because there's energy in the market, which comes from how people are feeling about things. So I think psychology is incredibly powerful. You know, I think, you know, your own worst enemy your worst enemy in investing is probably yourself. You are the one that will suffer from cognitive biases. You will be the one that suffers from things like the endowment effect, valuing something more highly just because you hold it, loss aversion, fear and greed, basically. So
that was my next question, actually.
Yeah, but psychology is. I agree entirely with that. It's probably the most powerful thing in investing.
Right, and I agree with you wholeheartedly on that, and that's why I keep espousing the importance of psychology and knowing thyself. And the problem I have with a lot of the people I speak to on Twitter is that unless you're talking about this is a really good idea, and you're saying actually here's a really good book about psychology, or this is what I learned about this reading this book, or this is what Seth Klarman said, or this is what blah 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 said. It's like, oh come on, Pete, that's boring. Just tell me what you bought. That's all they're interested in. So this other question I had was about fear and greed, John. And as an historian, are you in agreement that we're going to keep seeing these things repeat themselves over and over again?
Yeah, forever. Forever.
And so why don't we as humans learn from history to see that this is coming again? What's going on?
Because this time it's different.
Those 4 words. Oh
yeah, absolutely. No. I think human beings have got a tough gig when it comes to being investors. There's actually something that one of my former colleagues, Algie Hall, wrote about in a really fantastic piece. I think what is it called? Tame Your Brain at the IC. And we are little evolved from the sort of hunter-gatherers of thousands of years ago in terms of the way we think, the way our mind works, and yet we live in an increasingly complex system. So the reactions you have when you're investing are the same reactions you would have perhaps had when you were out hunting or gathering or whatever it might be, but they're not necessarily the right reactions in this day and age. So you've almost got to kind of like teach yourself how to not be yourself, which is really, really hard. And people are motivated by wealth. People are motivated by the sort of thrill of being in the markets, potentially making a lot of money when someone else hasn't spotted it. Those motivations will always be there. So I don't know if it's possible to learn from history. I don't know if it's possible. We can try, but you've got to take a real step back sometimes and a deep breath. It's not. I don't think it's about learning from history. I think it's about really, really, as you say, know thyself. Learn how to understand yourself, rather than understanding that someone bought tulip bulbs in Holland in the 17th century for far more than they were ever likely to be worth.
Very good point. Well made, mate. Thank you very much. Now, John, I want to conclude this period of you being at Investors Chronicle with this question. You and your colleagues positively impacted hundreds of thousands of investors' lives for the better. If you could tell long-term investors one thing about the art of successful long-term investing, what would that be?
One thing. So the one thing would be know yourself, but we've done that one already. So, it is really that you don't have to take massive risks to do well over the long term in investing. If you drip cash into the market, if you drip it into assets that are reasonably priced, then and I am going to refer back to history here because it suggests that markets have a habit of getting through even some of the biggest worries that are thrown at us. They survived a couple of world wars. They've survived all sorts of horrendous two crises that I lived through. The Wall Street crash, that obviously I wasn't around for, but markets go on, and the magic of compounding. Take your dividends, reinvest them. Don't do anything stupid with your sort of core pot. Have fun money if you want to have a little speculate, but the core pot, just be sensible. Don't panic. Don't do anything mad, and actually don't look at it every day. It's
very good point.
That will only panic you into action. And I think we know that the financial service industry makes more money the more you do. So don't be bounced into doing things.
Brilliant. I love that reply, John. Thank you ever so much. John, I've long been a great admirer and advocate of continual learning. Please can you share with us what drove you after 19 years of absence to go back to academia to commence your master's qualification in history of science, technology and medicine? I find this fascinating. Go on.
Yeah, it was probably something to do with the GFC, Great Financial Crisis, and what followed, which has been a very extended period of essentially monetarism. Monetary policy rules all. And we're still seeing that today. We're still seeing, the prospect of the Fed tightening, of interest rate rises is what is moving the markets. And I kind of felt that, looking back at history, what we sometimes forget is, what happened in the industries behind them. So yes, the rising tide can lift all boats, but not all boats ultimately end up in the same place. So how do we understand how industries or science have evolved to get to the point where they are now? How have companies evolved to get where they are now? And I just felt that how that's been supported or not by government policy. So all of this stuff coming together. I looked at things like the history of the supermarket industry, which is absolutely fascinating. The history of the broiler chicken, it was a particularly interesting story. But it's really interesting because it tells us why we eat the way we eat today, why we have the consumer habits that we do today. Look at something like plant-based meat is an evolution of that story. So I kind of felt, there was so much focus on the market, the economy, the monetary policy behind it, that we weren't actually really thinking very much about industries and as I say, how they came to be what they are. And I just kind of thought this is going to change at some point, and I still think it will.
Right, but we were living in it, like you've already touched on it. We're living in an era of consumerism where things are built not to last, so we end up buying the next update and the next, move, which you and Phil have spoken about numerous times.
Yeah, I mean, this for me is quite a worry. So actually, one of the modules I did on this course was the history of climate change.
I was going to touch on that. Go on.
So actually, we do live in this consumer society. There's a great book whose name I now forget, which is about how we've developed into this consumer society, where convenience and disposability seem to be, the thing that it's built on. Now, my view would be, well, something's going to happen again. Now, we are sort of heading towards a situation where we will be resource constrained. We have a real problem with energy, as we're seeing. We have a real problem with waste. Look at the history of the nuclear power industry in this country as well. It's something else I touched on the course. And it's obvious to see why we're in the position we are. I think we are probably at a bit of a tipping point in terms of the way some industries operate. I think you look at the history of industry. Certainly during post Second World War, it's very much a sort of chemical based development. I think we're going to probably need to see some changes there now again, because we have a serious pollution problem. So actually, I think this ESG has become massive. It wasn't really even being talked about 5 years ago when I finished this course, but I think this is the next big step in where we go technologically and behaviourally as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you've got two twin daughters who are now in their teens, John, right? And that era and that generation are so vocal now regarding decarbonisation. All these companies are talking about net zero and all the rest of it. It's a case of, really, can they actually manage that? Tobacco companies are being put into ethical funds. I find it quite worrying, really.
Yeah, I mean, that is another thing that, sort of in the last few years at the IC and increasingly with InvestAbility, ESG as a label is something that worries me a great deal. I think, as you say, lots of companies get labeled with this sort of ethical, sustainable tag when they're not really. I see it as a bit of a gimmick that some companies within the investment world have used to kind of make themselves relevant still in an age of ETFs. Too much box ticking, not really looking at the big problems. Talk of net zero. Well, it's politicians talk rather than the pragmatic situation on the ground, which is what we're now seeing the results of in sort of Eastern Europe and Ukraine. So yeah, it is a worry. Net zero is, we need to do something, but what worried me over the past few years was, watching divestment, watching oil companies, and we don't need them anymore. We'll chuck them on the pile. We've got electric cars now. And it just seemed, we were rushing headlong towards net zero when we hadn't actually worked out how to do it. Now, I think there is definitely a need for it, and I think there's lots of companies out there that could play a part. But I just feel it's politically motivated or financially motivated, and lacks the structures it needs to really achieve what needs to be achieved in terms of reducing emissions, reducing pollution, reducing waste.
No, I agree with you. Now, you co-founded the educational investing website InvestAbility with our mutually very dear friend Phil Oakley in 2021, and now you're continuing under a different structure. What remains, though, is a statement of intent, John, captured in your website's tagline: free thinking, plain speaking, insight into the world of investing. Now, I love that. Now, please tell me more about the website, and you've touched on there about the independence and objectivity analysis and insights that you value for investors, which is much needed out there right now.
Yeah, so as you rightly say, Phil and I launched it in September last year, and our view was really to kind of keep doing the sort of deep dive, analytically led research into publicly listed companies and funds where we thought they were interesting. So we've got a bit of investment coverage up there, investment trust coverage, sorry. And I'd like to do a lot more of that. We really wanted it to be educational. So it's actually a lot of the time using live company examples to teach an educational aspect. And we always wanted to avoid telling people what to do. There are hundreds of ways to skin a cat in the stock market. There are always divergent opinions on whether something is attractive or not attractive as an investment, and different reasons, as I said earlier, why people would want to buy something or not, as the case may be. And so we said from day one, we're never going to say buy, we're never going to tip. We're going to present a case, and we're going to present the bull case, and we're going to present the bear case, and it's up to people to make their own minds up. So that's and we're not going to pull any punches either, which is. It's just which is the fun bit.
Yeah, objectivity. I love it. I mean, this is what I love about the plan and the structure and what you've got in place to do with InvestAbility. For me, it's about the passion of being objective. To give the analysis, warts and all, to say, look, now you've got all this information. You go away and make your mind up as to what you want to do, and also go and do some more research of your own.
Yeah, and exactly, and so hopefully we're offering a starting point and a framework that people can use to go away and do that research. The other thing we really wanted to make sure we did was invest. So in my previous lines of work, I've not always had the freedom to invest as I wanted. When Phil came to join us some years ago from SharePad, which he kind of helped build before he came to the IC, he had to give up his SIP, which we ran as a dummy portfolio. But I think something I've now learned or experienced, I would say, is just how different it is to observe than to participate when you're talking about stock markets. You can be the cleverest pundit in the world, and you can nail everything and know a company's balance sheet inside out, or what the likely trajectory of interest rates is going to be, but sit down in front of your broker and put that order in and press fire. That's a different experience.
Absolutely.
And it's one, I want to be closer to the people I'm writing for, and that's essentially why we set this up.
Brilliant. I love what you've just said there about the nuance of writing about it, and I'm not saying it's practical in theory, but writing about it and actually doing it, when you have to put in your hard-earned £1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 of your SIP into that stock which you've analysed, it's a whole difference to just writing about the, what the company said it's going to do on a tin, and then watching the market go up and down 5 or 10%. It's a completely different thing. I see so many people talking the talk, but when it comes to the markets, they've gone up, they've gone, John, they've left. There's no conversation being had about the stock that they owned or were championing or cheerleading for 3 years when it's gone south.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, and that in itself is it's part of that sort of psychology of investing that we were talking
Absolutely.
about a minute ago. So yeah, I mean, just understanding that, and I say I feel I've learned a great deal. And we always wanted our readers at the IC to do well, and we always felt very responsible for the things we wrote and the accuracy of the things we wrote. But I would say doing this, as an investor now, that sense of responsibility is bigger than it ever was before. You kind of realize if I've really got to get this right. I've really got to be, bang on the money, because I know how much is at stake being an investor myself.
Good, very good point. Now I've got a question for you here, and I think this is one that people are basically having conversations about right now. Growth stocks, especially techs, have dominated over value stocks for several years. Can you foresee a period where value investing, almost Warren Buffett-esque value investing style, might come back into vogue? If so, what metrics screening could investors do in their attempt to locate long-term winners, John?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I saw something really, I think it was Terry Smith who said it the other day in his last Fundsmith letter. He was talking about what is value. And I thought that was really, really quite interesting, because I'd written something similar myself. I'm not sure what value really means. It gets used for all sorts of different things. It's junk that's been sold off, or stuff that's sort of been languishing without really offering much growth, or is it sort of based on sort of the ability to pay out dividends? There are so many, or just lower valuations. Actually, I think you should always be looking for value, whatever you're buying. So growth investing should also have a component of value investing in it. If you're trying to find something that's going to grow, you shouldn't be prepared to do that at any price. What you should be thinking is the growth on offer here good value? And so I think these things are almost talked about, growth and value are talked about separately, and on some metrics they are, but actually sensible investment combines the two. And actually, if you turn around and say, I'm a growth investor, well, you're ruling out a big chunk of the market. If I'm a value investor, you're actually ruling out another big chunk of the market. Whereas, why do that? There is a world of opportunity out there, and you cut it in half by putting yourself in a camp. Makes no sense to me.
I love that response, John. Thank you for that. That is a truly, truly fantastic reply. Thank you. Now, I want to talk about you're redeveloping, you're restructuring for 2022 InvestAbility. What are your goals and ambitions for InvestAbility in 2022?
Yeah, I really want to grow the amount of content on there. It's what I've been doing, in the last month or so. Really kind of trying to work out exactly where we can add the most value. And I think I'm getting closer to that. I think right now, in the market that we're in, which is sort of febrile, should we say, I really just want to make sure that all our readership have the sort of tools at their disposal to really survive in what could be a difficult market. So what else do I want to do? I want to get the podcast back up and running. That hopefully will happen next week or this week. There's been a delay, which is my fault because I wasn't very well. What else are we doing? I'm kind of, as I say, I really want to do something that gets us closer to our readership, to private investors. So we're sort of exploring some things that around that will sort of help bring private investors together. One of which could be an event. So I moved up to Suffolk last year. My family have a very large, a smallish farm or a larger small holding. So we have a venue. So I'm possibly thinking about doing an event. But yeah, it's kind of, a little bit up in there at the moment, just trying to sort of work out what people want. I think people are kind of concentrating on what's happening to their portfolios at the moment, because it's been very, very, very unnerving. But the thing I really want to do is just be fun and entertaining. I think there's a lot of investment writing out there. A lot of it's very dry, and I think to be readable, you've got to be entertaining as well. So yeah, quirky. That's where I want to be. More quality tunes in my daily emails. Music is the answer.
No, that's cool. No, mate, that's brilliant. I mean, all I would say is just please keep me posted, keep London South East posted as well, and we'll try and do what we can to help garner some attention to what you're doing, because your work and what you've done over the years has been invaluable to so many people, John. So we just need to keep you and InvestAbility thriving going forward. So where can they find the website? Tell us about the website and where else they can find you regarding the podcast.
Yeah, so it's www.invest-ability.co.uk. There's plenty of free content on there as well, if you want to have a sort of look around before you decide to take the plunge and subscribe. Podcast, well, as I say, it's a bit up in the air at the moment, but you can find it through the website, or it will reappear in the next week or so on the various podcast channels. I think Apple's our biggest one. Spotify, Buzzsprout, all the usual. And yeah, we sign up on the website as well to the daily email. So yeah, lots of forms on there for doing that, which I'll get up and running again soon. I've just been sort of sitting back at the moment, trying to keep an eye on the markets, sort of take stock. I think it's very easy to put out snap views, which turn out to be wrong a day later, particularly at the moment. So I'm kind of just sort of sitting back. And I think a lot of people should think about doing the same. Don't be panicked into action.
Be less reactive. Reactive. Agree with you. Yeah. Agree.
So yeah, that's kind of where we are. It's
cool,
exciting.
John, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today on the Investing Matters podcast. Thank you for all your insight and all your education going forward, and I look forward to watching your journey and your growth going forward.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you very much, fella. Take care. God bless.
You too.